Welcome to A Higher Branch, a source of practical and powerful information for busy people dedicated to boosting their personal health and professional performance. I'm your host, Sam McCall. Hello and welcome. Now, most of the people that I know in my social circles wake up every morning and they say, how can I make $1 million or $1 billion? But the person I'm about to interview is a person that wakes up every morning and says, how can I upgrade 1 billion minds? Welcome, Jim Kwik.
Thanks for having me, Sam. It's good to be here.
Now, most of our community is in Australia, probably may not have heard who Jim Kwik is. So I'm just going to give you a brief rundown. But look, most of the bio is on upgradeyourlife2020.com. There's a bio page there for a Jim, and you'll get the full picture. He is the memory and learning coach to a lot of celebrities, billionaires, and you'll see faces like Will Smith, Richard Branson and co. And we are exceptionally honored to have him in the studio. He's here on giving a talk to 10,000 people, and he was kind enough to put aside an hour to talk to us. And he really believes in what we're doing at A Higher Branch and loves our mission. And so I just want to, before we get into it, because I know you're here to provide information, but one thing, I did a lot of research and listened to a lot of podcasts, but one question that I have just out of curiosity is that you developed learning programs because you had a couple of injuries when you were young, and people will find that out on the bio, and you had a defining moment when a teacher whispered to another teacher when you were 9, and she said, oh, that's the boy with the broken brain. And out of that adversity, out of that anxiety, you developed learning programs for yourself. But when did you get the metaphorical tap on the shoulder from the universe, from God, to answer that calling and then provide those learning strategies and techniques to the world at large and kick off quick learning?
So this dates back, I started this when I was 18 years old, and I haven't done anything. This is my sole focus. I had a revelation when I was 18 where I'd struggled my whole life with studies because I had this accident, this traumatic brain injury. As you mentioned, when I was 9, a teacher was just frustrated with me because I didn't understand like everybody else understood. They would explain themselves over and over again, and I would pretend to understand, but I didn't really understand. So I had these learning difficulties. When I was 18, I went to university, and I thought freshman meant I could make a fresh start, and I thought I would make my family proud. They had immigrated to the United States from Asia, and typical story, they didn't have the money or the resources, the education. We lived in the back of a laundromat that my mother worked at. And so it was a big challenge. So I really wanted, my motivation really was my family, so that they could, I could succeed that way. When I was 18, I actually did worse in college, and I was ready to quit. And my friend invited me to stay with him over the weekend to visit his family and to get new perspective. And I find that perspective is very important. When we change place or we change people that we spend time with, we get a different point of view. And the family was very well off, and father asked me this simple question, how's school, which is the worst question you could ask me at the time. And I break down, and I'm pretty reserved and conservative, but I just tell him all my challenges and how I'm the boy with the broken brain, and I can't learn like everybody else. I'm ready to quit school. And then he guides me through a process of defining my goals and why I'm in school, and encourages me to read 1 book a week that he provided me. And I wasn't a good reader, so I was fighting him on it. I said, I have all this schoolwork, and he says, Jim, you can't let school get in the way of your education, and you also have to learn on your own. And so I'm back at school. I have a pile of books I have to read for midterms. A pile of books I promised to read. I couldn't keep up, so I end up not eating, not sleeping, just living in the library. And I passed out one night out of sheer exhaustion. I fall down a flight of stairs, hit my head again, and I woke up in the hospital. And at this point, I had lost all this weight. I was hooked up to IVs, and I thought there had to be a better way. And it made me pursue, learn this art of learning how to learn and make that my study. And when I did, I started studying everything from neuroscience to adult learning theory to multiple intelligence theory to things like ancient wisdom. I wanted to know thousands of years ago, what did the ancient Greeks do to be able to memorize things before printing presses and smartphones? And slowly into it, about 60 days into it, a light switch flipped on, and I understood things for the first time in a different way. I started to read faster. I started to remember more. And because I had those core competencies, my grades improved, but my life improved. How I ended up teaching it, it's interesting because I couldn't help but help other people because I got very upset that I struggled for my whole life. And there were simple, easy things I could have done to be able to, tap into more of that potential, but no one showed me how. Because school, I learned, was a great place to learn what to learn and what to think and, what to remember, but not necessarily how to learn, how to think, how to remember. I think those are important subjects that really, no matter what your profession, and I know you have a lot of high achievers and professionals and business owners, founders listening, that the number one wealth creating device we have in the world is our brain. Yes. We live in an age where nobody who's listening to this is paid for their muscle power. You're paid for your mind power. It's not your brute strength, it's your brain strength. The challenge is nobody shows us how to use our brain because it doesn't come with an owner's manual. So I started right there to help individuals, and my very first person I started tutoring, she read 30 books in 30 days. Which is astonishing, and not skim or scan or just got the gist of what she read. She really understood it. As you mentioned, I train a lot of professionals, top attorneys, financial advisors, politicians, doctors. You don't want your doctor to get the gist of what she's just reading, right? Yes. And so, and her motivation, though, was her mother was dying of cancer, and the books she was reading were books to save her mom's life, and she ended up doing so. And that's when I realized that if knowledge is power, then learning really is our superpower. And it's a superpower we all have, regardless of our age, our background, our career, our education level, our financial situation, our gender, our history, our IQ. We all have the potential to be better in that area.
Wow. So that was the defining moment with your first student, if you like.
It was. It put me on a path that if knowledge is power, learning is our superpower, and it's a power we all have. Yes. And that's what I want for people. My mission of, I want to leave no brain left behind. I want to reach everybody's brain because I know we all have a better version of our minds than we think. Yeah, absolutely. And on that point, what I want to tell people exactly how I came to learn about Jim Kwik and Kwik learning. So I'm obsessed with optimizing performance. We walked around our office, and you would have noticed that we have an office full of high achievers, and everyone's on the go. We're a company on a mission, and we did have a defining moment last year when we implemented a lot of your strategies internally, and I'm going to get to that. But first, I was actually sitting in a cafe in Balmoral Beach with a good friend of mine. Well, now he's a good friend of mine. I had just met him at the time. His name is Angelo Campagnala. He's a chiropractor. And we ordered some food and some coffee, and he said to me, I just did this memory and learning course with a guy called Jim Kwik. Have you heard of him? And I said, no. And he said, throw some numbers at me. He said, how many? Double-digit numbers, give me 20, 25, 30, I forget how much it was, but I gave him quite a few. So I rattled off all these numbers, 23, 44, 96, 18, 11. And I wrote it in I put it in my iPhone, I remember, because I thought, well, this guy, I'm not going to remember it. So, and the waitress comes back in, puts the coffees on the table, and I didn't realize he was just processing. And then no sooner than I picked up the cup, he started rattling off the numbers. And I looked, and then he went backwards. And I was completely blown away. And I thought, so that night I went home and I Googled who you were. Mm-hmm. And some strange coincidence, I found out that you were speaking at an event in Sardinia. And
and my family happened to be going to Italy that exact month. So I said to my wife, let's take Amelia out of school 5 days earlier and go to Sardinia. And that's when we saw 2 of your talks. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was just some light bulbs started going off. And I started thinking, okay, we are now on the, and this is what's happening internally at MSA National. For most of you who are listening would know I'm a banking and finance lawyer. And so digital transformation is really impacting our industry. And so we had launched a program called Digital Now, and we've implemented robotics. We're tinkering with AI, live chat robots, customized video. And what I noticed was happening internally is that what we knew had to be all thrown out the window. So we needed to learn some new things fast. And we needed to build a center of excellence for our robotics program. We had 1 person, now we have 9. And so we needed our people to actually learn how to learn fast. And it reminds me of something Peter Diamandis, I think, said at Singularity University last year. And I printed this out hoping that we would touch on this. And he said, your brain is programmed to be linear, but in these next few decades, the rate of change is growing so fast that almost everything we can conceive can happen. Every industry is potentially disruptable in the near future. And if you're not excited or scared, you're asleep at the wheel. And for those of you who are listening at the moment, even the change that is coming between now and the year 2023 is going to completely blow you away. I'm not saying I have a special lens into the future, but I hang out with people who are about to launch a lot of products. And your ability to learn things faster is going to be your number 1 skill. Forget about what you've learned. Like my father learned one thing for life, and that's how it was. But now my children are going to reinvent themselves 8 times in their career. So the strategies that I learned at those just 2 little workshops, one was a workshop and one was just a talk that you gave. I learned a lot of things, and so we want to get into that, and you call it meta learning. Mm-hmm. And we need that meta learning now in society to bridge the gap between the information that's out there and where our mind is at the moment. So our mind needs to go up at the same rate, as the information. And so we need some brain hacks. We need some brain training. So I hope that's a nice segue into talking about your brain hacks. Did you want to add anything to that before we get into those?
No, I honor not only what you do, but also the manner in which you do it. When you could take these kind of metrics that you have in business and finance and provide metrics. The great thing about learning is it's measurable, and it's hard to be able to manage something that you can't measure, but you can measure reading speed, you can measure comprehension, you can measure memory and focus. Simple things like whether it's the numbers that Angelo did forwards and backwards, or if it happens to be remembering names. I believe 2 of the most costly words sometimes in business are I forgot. I forgot to do it. I forgot to bring it. I forgot that meeting. I forgot that conversation. I forgot what I was going to say. I forgot that person's name. It just goes on and on and on. So memory, just like the rest of learning, is a forced multiplier, meaning the better you get at it, the more rewards you get back. Because in this today's economy, knowledge is not only power, the right knowledge is also profit. And there's this growing gap between people who know and people who don't know.
Yes.
And I think if there's one skill to master in today's age, the 21st century, it's our ability to learn rapidly, because as you mentioned, the half-life of information, it's just, there's too much information, too little time. Even the amount of information that's out there, it gets dated because of what Peter Diamandis is talking about, Moore's law. It's doubling at dizzying speeds, but how we process it and read it and focus and retain it and apply it, it's pretty constant. Yes. Only because we live in an age of fast-paced technology, but our vehicle of choice when it comes to learning is just, it's old. Our schooling didn't prepare us for the world we live in today. And in an age of artificial intelligence and automation, where a lot of jobs are going even overseas, what makes us human is the power of our mind, our ability to solve problems, our ability to be a critical thinker, a divergent thinker, our ability to imagine new things, our ability to strategize, things that a computer can't necessarily do, as well as our human mind, when we understand how it works.
Absolutely, and that was the experience in our organization. So a lot of the menial tasks that people don't want to do, where we had the highest staff turnover, now just handled by the robots. So a lot of people are scared of robotics, but it's really a way for humanity to leverage off so they can actually increase their happiness, improve their productivity, have more time at home, rather than having to work long hours on tasks that are just mind-numbing and soul-destroying. So I completely love what you said, and I love Moore's Law. I mean, Moore, for those of you who don't know, is the guy that invented the Intel. Is it the Intel chip, or was he the founder of IBM? Which one was it?
Yeah, Moore's Law is basically saying that the amount of, because of technology, as we're progressing, everything is happening exponentially, like Peter Diamandis talks about. He says, is this metaphor, if you could see 30 steps in front of you, linear steps. Yeah. If you needed to go 30 exponential steps and everything was doubling, it would take you, way around the earth multiple times, and that's exponential. And we're not used to it because we're used to linear and local, because as hunters and gatherers, we could see what's linear and also local. But nowadays, in this global environment, things that happen now, you could see it on Twitter and Facebook, yes, seconds later across the world. So it's no longer just what's happening in your local environment. And that's exciting for change makers. It's exciting for business owners and professionals, because you could scale, and using technology is not necessarily good or bad. It's just how we apply it to get the result we're looking for. So
absolutely
exciting times.
And a lot of people say, well, humans are losing jobs to the robots. I've had some people, whenever I've given a keynote on this, question me on that, say, well, you're losing, you're destroying jobs. I say, well, my rebuttal is that, well, you're treating your people like robots if you're giving them these tasks that can be performed or automated. And so it does take there's always pain in pivoting, in changing. We need to transition away from our current mindset to develop the skills of creativity, imagination, strategy. They're the three most important skills that we need to work on. And meta learning is the key, isn't it? Really,
it is. Meta learning. If people look it up, it's the science of learning how to learn. Again, I think it's one of the most important subjects, if not the most important, because anything applied after gets easier. Because if you could learn how to learn, you could apply that towards marketing. You could apply that towards mentorship. You could apply that towards Mandarin. You could apply that towards music. You could apply that to machine learning, whatever it is that's important for yourself and your business. And that's the economy that we're in. The faster you can learn, the faster you could earn. And the best news ever is that we have the most incredible adaptation learning tool in the world, which is the human brain.
That's, absolutely. And there is a convergence that's going to happen in 2035, they're predicting, where artificial intelligence and human intelligence are going to converge. And this is the point that we're going to get to, where it's going to be extremely challenging, and we need to know how to learn fast. And it's going to be interesting. No one knows what it's going to feel like or be like. But I think to demonstrate what meta learning is, I want to just take people through just a virtual tour of your office.
Okay. You can do that.
Because I listened to a podcast yesterday you did with Brian Rose on London Real, which was an incredible interview. You took him through a visualization, and I was just listening it. So I was imagining, right? And I completely remembered it. And I'm thinking, how? I remembered your 10 principles within 2 minutes. I remember them from that. And then I taught those principles to my daughter within 2 minutes.
Amazing.
And she learnt it. And you know, I mean, you just have to trust me, guys. For those of you saying, no, surely you couldn't remember, I'll take you through it. So this is a virtual tour of Jim's office. So I didn't go to Jim's office. I don't know what it looks like. I was in New York recently, but I can visualize where Westchester is. So I land on Westchester Airport. I'm picked up by a limousine that takes me to your car park. And we get out of the limousine, and in the car park is a huge table of incredible food.
Wow.
And that
much like you have here
yes.
at your office. All the brain foods.
Yes, the team were kind enough to prepare all his brain food for Jim. We have blueberries.
Brainberries.
Well, you call them brainberries, that's it. Now my daughter likes blueberries because you call them brainberries. Dark chocolate and some walnuts. And
amazing.
So that's the first thing I want you guys to remember, brain food in the car park at Jim's office building. Now we're going towards the building to go up in the elevator. Before we get there, we have to go over a bridge. And as we walk over the bridge, I notice these giant ants and I'm stepping on them. Ants represents automatic
negative thoughts.
Negative thoughts. So just remember that. That's the second principle that we're going to talk about now.
Killing those ants. I mean, that negative self-talk we have sometimes, that people come to me all the time. They say, Jim, I have a horrible memory, or Jim, I'm getting too old, or I'm not smart enough. And we got to get rid of that negative programming, because your brain is like a supercomputer and your self-talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you won't remember the names of the people you need to remember because you program your supercomputer not to. So
absolutely. And yeah, I wanted to go through all 10 principles, but the 3 areas I wanted to do a deeper dive is one of those is automatic negative thoughts. And that's something that plagues a lot of people in the corporate world whenever the economy goes south, or they, especially people in sales, experience rejection and failure all the time. And it's an emotional hit. This is something I talk about with Dr. Guy Winch all the time. How do you deal with rejection and failure? Because automatic negative thoughts are negative self-talk, isn't it? So I guess, do I have a question? I guess the question is, how do we deal with negative, what are your techniques?
Yeah, I would tell you right up is that your mind is so powerful. People truly understood how powerful their mind was. They wouldn't say or think something they didn't want to be true. And that's not to say you have one negative thought and it ruins your life any more than just eating, a donut. It's going to ruin your life just once, but it's the consistency that really makes a difference. Because I always tell people, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And a lot of people are always arguing for their limits about what they can't do or who they're not. And in today's economy, it's risky to play it safe, but so many people are afraid of making mistakes because of how it's going to look to other people, and their negative self-talk, the beliefs of other people and their expectations sometimes becomes our internal self-talk. Just like that teacher who called me the boy with the broken brain, that became my self-talk. Every time I wasn't picked for sports or every time I didn't do well in school, I would always say it's because I have the broken brain. And that became my talk, and that became my reality. So we always want to monitor, or at least the starting point with all change is self-awareness. So people can't change something they don't realize is a challenge. So just sensitize yourself to your self-talk. And then what I would also say on top of it is, you could audit it and edit it. So even if you catch yourself saying, oh, I'm not great remembering names, you could add a little word like yet at the end. I'm not great at remembering names yet, because their language has a profound effect on our brains. And meaning that, just like just this morning, somebody was complaining to me that they got to do all these things. They just went on a rant. I got to work out. I got to take the kids, pick up the kids. I got to, I got to go to work. And I'm just like, hold it for a second. Like, what if you turn that got into get? And then they went, oh, I get to pick up my kids. I get to work out today. I get to go to a job, and it changes everything, because just that one little letter, from an O to an E, got to get, there's gratitude that's built in. So we always want to be conscious of those words. So I would say the beginning point is be conscious of your self-talk, because some of us are so used to hearing ourselves, so we kind of don't pay attention. you know, and it becomes rote. And they say with the average person has about 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. The challenge is 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts we had yesterday and the day before that. And people wonder why they can't innovate, or they're creating the same challenges over and over again. It's because our thoughts are the same. And so be wary of your self-talk.
That's really some couple of powerful tips there. And but really,
this journey you're taking through my office is interesting, because you gave me a tour of your office. So you went from you went to the car park, the parking lot, and then you had the first principle, which is good brain foods. And then from there you crossed the bridge and you're killing ants, which is the second principle. And then from there you mentioned the elevator.
Yeah, so now we've arrived into the lobby and we go up the elevator, but I notice that I'm a little bit stiff from the flying and the being in the car, so I drop and do some burpees and some push-ups, because I want it to be fresh. You know, I wanted my mind to spark with this motion, the mind. And so the third principle is exercise.
It is. As your body moves, your brain grooves. And we know that when you when you work out, besides what's good for your heart is good for your head. So you'll do better on mental acuity tests, focus, memory, because you're creating more blood flow and oxygen to your brain, which is very important. Your brain is only about 2% of your body mass, but it requires about 20% of the oxygen and nutrients. So you're keeping your brain fresh and clear of that brain fog. But the other thing is you create brain-derived neurotropic factors, B, D, and F, which is just fancy terms for, it's like fertilizer for your brain, that we realize now. We've discovered more about the human brain more in the past 10 years than the previous 1,000 years. And it's not fixed. There's this processes called neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, where we're able to create new brain cells, new connections to the day we die. So it's not set and fixed like our shoe size. And the fertilizer for that is brain-derived neurotropic factors, and what helps create that is exercise. So very, very important. So you notice you got to third place, which is elevator, and then remind you of the third principle, which is movement. And they say that sitting sometimes now they consider sitting the new smoking. We live such a sedentary lifestyle. Yes. We're behind computers all day, 8 hours, 9 hours a day. And it's important every half an hour just to kind of get up and stretch and move around, because it's good for not only your body, but also your mind.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that exercise is actually first and foremost for the mind, not so much the body. It's really, your diet is what impacts the body more. It's an 80-20 rule. So with the diet impacts your body more, and with exercise, it's the other way. It impacts the mind more. That's what I found. So that's something that we've implemented in our workplace. Sam, who you mentioned earlier, gets everyone up, stretching, moving, and they just get sharper throughout the day.
It does.
Yeah. So that's the third principle. Mm-hmm. Now we're going up the elevator, and the elevator door opens, and I think I know where your boardroom is, where you are. So I walk. Hallway, and to the right I notice a table full of supplements.
Yeah, the hallway there reminds you of, there's just supplements everywhere, and that's to remind you of brain nutrients, meaning that some of us we travel and it's hard sometimes to eat the perfect brain diet, and I recommend people go to their functional medicine doctor, have a little nutrient profile done to see if you're lacking, like vitamin E, very important. Neuroprotective. The B vitamins, your brain vitamins are very important. DHA, omega-3s, your brain is mostly fat. And so if you're deficient in these nutrients, you can learn the best speed reading technique or remembering names technique or give a speech technique from memory. But if you're deficient in these what they call neuronutrients, they've discovered that your brain has different nutrient requirements than the rest of your body. Yes. And so you want to make sure you have those to thrive.
Yeah. Very good point, because look, a lot of people that have heard me talk will know I'm not a big fan of supplements. Why I wasn't, but I did a genetic test with one, and I realized I was deficient from some minerals. And so we can, just by genetically, we're wired that way, or the soil is not as rich as it used to be.
This is true. Like I love all the food that you have here because I always rather get nutrients from food because it's natural. Also because there's no supplement that's going to be able to replace the food because there's other contributing factors and nutrients that make that food, powerful and nutrient dense. And some of these nutrients work together. And then if you just take out that one, nutrient and put it in a pill, it's not going to have the same effect as if it would in a whole food. But I agree also. I'm practical in that sometimes I know on the go I might not be able to have the perfect diet. So where needed, I'll supplement.
Yeah, and now, biotech and infotech is converging. So you can go do a blood test, hair mineral analysis, a gut microbiome test. So one of the people on our faculty is Alessandra Edwards, and she's a DNA-based performance coach. So she's based in Melbourne. So anyone that's in Melbourne or Sydney for that matter, if you want to know exactly what's going on at the cellular level in your body, you could be deficient in something, as I discovered. And highly recommend you go and do some genetic testing with Alessandra and tick off that fourth principle, of taking the right supplements for your body to feed your brain. So the fifth principle is I walk down the hallway and I open a door thinking it's the boardroom. In fact, it's the closet, and out jumps my positive peer group.
Great memory.
Or a support team, as I call it. And I'm thinking, guys, what are you doing here? Out pops, my wife, my business partner, my best friend, my personal trainer. So the fifth principle is...
Yeah, the positive peer group, you nailed it, because that's number 5. You go to the closet. Inside the closet are all your happy, positive, cheerleading friends. Because we realize that when it comes to your brain health, it's not just your neurological networks, they're your social networks. That who you spend time with is who you become. We've heard this phrase that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, because part of your nervous system, you have these mirror neurons that are always imitating people around you, and it creates empathy. It's the reason you can watch sports or a movie and you can feel what the characters are going through. It's how we learn, and we tend, talking about the human mind, we're this adaptation machine, and we tend to adapt and adopt the mindset of the people around us.
Yes,
the
very
beliefs,
powerful.
the behaviors, the habits. So it's not, whether just what's wired genetically. It's like if your friend's friend does this, you're more likely to do the same behavior because we imitate people around us. Absolutely. So I think it's very important to do an audit of people around us. I would say that also sometimes if we feel like people closest to us are negative, we could choose who has influence over us, meaning that you could love your family and also understand that criticism from people close to you. I always tell people that don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from, which is interesting because it's so often that we could get buried by other people's opinions and their expectations, and they could be sincere, but they could be sincerely wrong. Friends and family could want you not to be hurt. They can want you not to get your hopes up or be disappointed, or maybe they are afraid of losing you because you're progressing in some area of life. So they could have good intentions. It's just that they could be sincerely wrong at the same time. So I would say is surround yourself with as positive people as you can. And everybody needs somebody, that person that encourages them, that believes in them, that challenges them. And if you haven't found that person yet, I would encourage you to be that person for somebody else, and especially be that person for you.
Yeah, especially if you have kids. So you need to be what you want your kids to be.
Because kids are always imitating, and they don't do so much as you say, more of what you do. I have a primary belief that the life you live are the lessons you teach. That people, even in business, I would say people have to spend less time promising and more time proving, less time saying, more time showing in our, the example that we have for other people. Even when we're talking about our friends and family, sometimes you can't be a prophet in your own hometown. The best thing, people could be like, why are you going to another conference? Why are you listening to another podcast? Why are you always reading those books, right? And we have to go through our own process, but you can't change anybody. So many people come to me and say, oh, what do I do about my spouse or my kids or the people, my coworkers? And I would say you can only change behavior so much. It's so hard to change your own behavior. So think about how hard it is going to be to change somebody else's behavior. But what I would say is to live your life and let your life be an example of what's a possibility.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Love that. That's really cool.
So that's number 5. We're halfway through the 10.
Yeah. So the closet's clearly not the boardroom. So I go back to the receptionist to ask where the boardroom is, and she didn't notice me. She's busy cleaning and tidying. So the next principle, the 6th principle, is a clean environment.
It is.
And why is that important for our brain?
Well, yeah. I mean, just as the 6th place, and we notice the strategy at the meta level here is we're taking places that we are now familiar with, common, like in my office as an example, and we're storing information in these different places. So in the first place is the first principle, the second place is the second principle, and so on. So number 6 is the receptionist, and she's demonstrating a clean environment. And what science shows is that our external world is a reflection of our internal world. We know this because when we clean, have you ever, cleaned your office or your laptop, desktop, and all of a sudden you have clarity of thought, right?
Yes. All the time.
We know that when you make your bed and you have a clean environment, it just puts you in a certain state of mind. Just like when things are messy, it puts you in a certain state of mind also.
Yes.
And so I would encourage everybody to Marie Kondo their mind, if you will, and make it less messy. The other thing I would say when I'm saying clean environment are the things that you've talked about, that you practice, eliminating these invisible super villains. I did a whole podcast about this, but we've talked about it. One of them is light. And so it's invisible, but I love your offices because you have all this indirect sunlight. And sometimes if we're just dependent on the ones that they put in your building or in your school, it's not the best lighting because it's inexpensive, and it's actually, certain lighting is actually not good for...
You notice they're off?
Yeah, I noticed that. So indirect sunlight is absolutely the best. And I love also that you practice this, and I've noticed this consistently over high achievers. They take knowledge and they put it into power, where knowledge is not power. It only comes power when we apply it. And I love how you constantly applying with yourself, with your family, with your team, because that's the difference that makes the difference. So, light is part of your environment, having a clean source of lighting. Another part of the environment is also electromagnetic fields. We're not really sure about it, but there's research that's suggesting that the human brain didn't adapt with cell phones so close to our heads and all this technology. And so is there a correlation? And so just you could do your own research and look into it. But other sources are air quality. That's a clean environment, because we know that if there's toxins in the air, it's going to affect your cognitive performance, no doubt. And then the 4th one I would put out there is invisible, is water. It's not invisible, but it's hopefully your water is clear and clean water. So, having it filtered, because sometimes there's a high concentration of things that maybe shouldn't be in our drinking water. And so I would say all those fall into the area of clean environment. So that's number 6.
Number 6. That's really good. Now, with the just on air, when you talked about the air quality and EMFs, we had Joachim Herman, who's a building biologist. So for guys, if you're interested in the dangers of EMF and how it impacts the brain, listen to that podcast with Joachim. It's been one of our most popular, actually, and highly recommend it. And it ticks the box for the principle that we just talked about. Also, on the breath, remember that 70% of detox happens through the breath. So when you are shallow breathing at your desk, and we tend to do it on the computer, on our phones, driving, in meetings, that when you're shallow breathing, you're not expelling toxins and the carbon monoxide you take in. So I just thought I'd mention that because I know a lot of people pay thousands of dollars for detox programs and forget that the most powerful detox is your own breath. So
Yeah, I would say and that's on the exhale, and the inhale is also very important because so many people, when they encourage them to read more, or they're at their desk, their posture, it's collapsed. And if you collapse your diaphragm, the lower 1/3 of your lungs absorbs 2/3 of the oxygen. And a lot of people they're tired, not because they're hungry. It's just they're cutting off the oxygen flow to their brain. So they have that brain fog.
I did not know that. The bottom 1/3.
1/3 absorbs 2/3 of the oxygen. And that's so important, for it to get absorbed into the blood and go to the brain. And so I would say deep breathing is important, both on the inhale for the absorption and on the exhale in terms of the elimination.
As soon as you said that, I stood. I
think everybody's listening did that also, and just be conscious of it. But that's what I mean about self-awareness, because self-awareness, not only in your self-talk, but also your physiology, because your physiology affects your psychology, because as your body moves, your brain grooves. And so hold yourself, because it's the easiest thing in the world for, it's gravity. We're fighting against, a force that's pushing us down. And, just like David Goggins, who, I'm excited that he's speaking at the event to upgrade your life in January, because, he pushes against this resistance, because grit is so important. Grit is a muscle that you build, and you have to get yourself to do the hard things. Like, I talk about my morning routine, things I do in the morning to jumpstart my brain, but part of it is like taking a cold shower. I do not like the cold. I really do not like the cold, but I force myself to do it because it lowers inflammation in your body that could lead to challenges, health challenges, physiological challenges, but also I do it because it's difficult. Because when you train yourself to do difficult things, your life gets easier, because that shows up when you need to be able to do things that are uncomfortable, but you still need to perform. But I think you have to exercise that emotional, mental fitness.
Very good point. Absolutely. And that's something we teach our team here. We say, do the toughest stuff in the morning, the first half of the day, because when you do the tough stuff, everything else starts feeling easy. And in the afternoon, our mental sharp, we're not as mentally sharp, and our energy dips. It's natural. It's part of our circadian rhythm. So if you do the tough stuff first, then that stuff becomes easy in the afternoon.
And I would also encourage everyone to take on those things that they've been avoiding. Some people will procrastinate, they'll sabotage, they know there's something they need to do, but they keep on putting it off. And I would say do that thing, because it's been my experience that the treasure you seek is hidden in the work that you're avoiding. That work that you should be doing. It's the hard stuff. But if you just do the easy things in life, which is really nothing, the easy thing is just sitting on the couch and watching, YouTube or, Netflix or whatever. The easy thing is putting things off, not having that difficult conversation with a family member, or having that difficult conversation with somebody on your team. But if you do the difficult things, life gets a lot easier. But if you just do if you do the easy things, life gets very hard.
Yes.
Very, very hard.
And for those of you who are listening and in the corporate world, whether you're a mortgage broker or a lawyer, that's probably my number one tip. If there's a big takeaway from our talk today, I think that'd be it, because mental toughness is so critical for your day-to-day world. It really defines your identity. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and that's what a brain coach, that's what I want to do for people, is to, just like high achievers, they have a singer has a voice coach, a business person has a business coach, a financial advisor, athletes have personal trainers. I want to be a trainer and a coach for the most important muscle, which I feel like is your brain. It's not a muscle, but obviously it's an organ. But it's not just about being mentally intelligent. Yes, I could help anybody listening to quickly learn formulas and facts and foreign languages and so on. It's not just about mental intelligence. It's about mental fitness and mental health. And just like a personal trainer will make your muscles faster, stronger, more energized, more pliable, more flexible, I want to make your mental muscles stronger and more flexible, more agile, more pliable, more energized, and have that strength. So you just show up differently.
Wow. I'm ready.
I'm excited.
By the way, I love your T-shirt. It says, I just noticed, it says, follow your heart, but bring your brain. That is really, really cool. Can we get those T-shirts?
Yes, we actually, this is an original. We have about a dozen on our website.
Oh, you can buy them, can you?
Yeah, people go to jimkwik.com/merch. But for 10 years, or more than that now, I have the largest brain shirt collection because I really think you should wear your genius on your sleeves. People talk about wearing your heart on your sleeves as a phrase, where your emotions are. I think you need to be also, share those gifts and don't hold back on those. And I believe in wearing my inspiration. So loving my brain, honoring your brain, because you could see people's body, but you can't see their mind. And so I like kind of bringing it out because it controls everything. And I think everyone needs to fall in love with their brain. And if you want to improve your self-esteem, just study how your brain works. The 85, maybe 100, billion, brain cells that you have, and on the 10,000 different synapses, connections. I mean, it's more potential connections than known stars in the known universe. I mean, our brains are incredible. As people talk about technology all the time, but I think the ultimate technology is this. People talk about, I just spoke at the United Nations on their 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and people talking about space, but I want to talk about the space between their ears, that allows the moon all that possible.
I love your vision, the impact that you want to make. And I feel like your journey is probably just getting ramped up.
I'm excited. So yeah, we're talking about clean environment, and that's a big part of it. So I would encourage, and when we're going through this list of the 10 keys for unlocking what I call your Kwik brain, we're at number 6. Notice how easy it comes back. First of all, you could go back to the car park lot where you see the good brain foods, and then you cross the bridge, and then there are the killing the ants. And you go into the elevator, and what are you doing in the elevator? You're doing the push-ups and the burpees and the yoga. You're exercising. You get in the hallway, and you see the brain nutrients everywhere, brain vitamins, bottles everywhere. You go into the closet, and you see your positive peer group, and then you go to the receptionist, and you see your clean environment. But notice when you're going through this, not only does it come back into your mind, but I'd challenge everybody to just rate on a scale of 0 to 10, how much energy are you putting into these specific activities? How much, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much focus are you putting into a good brain diet? On a scale of 0 to 10, how good is your thinking in terms of positive or negative?
Yeah, it's good exercise.
And then, when it comes to your exercise, physical exercise, how much are you moving? And not just working out 3 times a week, but throughout the day. Are you disconnecting to reconnect? Are you going out in nature, or during your lunch break going for a walk and taking every opportunity to take the stairs instead of the elevator? So your movement 0 to 10. And then from there, your nutrients, which, talk to your healthcare professional, get your genetic testing done, see what you're low on or what you might be susceptible to, because I'm a believer in epigenetics and Alzheimer's, and I lost my grandmother to Alzheimer's, so this is a very, personal topic for me, is what some geneticists and neuroscientists are saying is they're saying, well, your genetics loads the gun, but it's your lifestyle that fires it off, when it comes to certain things. Yep. We know that about roughly 1/3 of your brain potential and your memory is predetermined by genetics and biology, but 2/3 is in your control, and I would say that 2/3, these 10 things we're talking about right now is those 2/3. And so really focus on that. But on scale of 0 to 10, your nutrients, 0 to 10, how good is your peer group? And maybe you have one energy vampire. People have to learn. Part of self-care and self-love is saying no. You have to realize that when you say yes to somebody or something, make sure you're not saying no to yourself. And part of self-care is creating borders and boundaries on your time, on your energy,
absolutely.
on your happiness, on your joy, on your mental health. Because one of the things is, I know your clients are and your listeners are highly successful, but the additional stress that comes from opportunity, because the more successful you are, the more opportunities you have, and you suffer from opportunity stress. And some people are just saying yes to way too many things, and they wonder why they're tired. But it's not because you're doing too much. And part of it is you're doing too much, but also you're doing too little of the things that really matter to you. that really light you up. I know a lot of people are suffering from burnout. I think that's also part of it, is they're doing too many things, but they're not doing enough of the things that really nurture them and bring them life. And so I think you need to be very conscious of that, especially in today's age where we also have the overload and the distraction and all the other challenges that come living in today's economy. So that's number 6. And so right behind the receptionist is this, we have in our office, the fish tank. We have a big tropical fish tank. And that's the place, but the brain tip is the fish are actually sleeping.
That's right. Well, I thought they were dead, so I asked the receptionist. She said, no, they're sleeping. And
that's to remind you to get good sleep. And Ariana Huffington, I remember I was speaking at an event. She was like, you got to sleep your way to the top. And what does that mean is prioritize your sleep, because it's probably one of the most important life hacks there is getting enough rest, because you could do everything else, but if you're not sleeping, how do you feel the next day? How do you perform the next day?
Yes.
How's your focus on a bad night's sleep? How's your memory? How's your ability to be creative? How's your wherewithal, your resilience? A lot of people are suffering now from mental fatigue, decision fatigue, where they can't make good decisions. They're wiped out by the time they're out in a restaurant, having their dinner. They're looking at a menu. They can't remember. They can't even decide what they want because they're so tired.
Yes.
And that's a challenge. And that's why systems are so important. The reason why I have so many routines, especially in the morning, is because same reason I've asked, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Tony Hsiehs, CEO of Zappos, why do they wear consistently a lot of the same clothing over and over and over again? It's because they say, Jim, I don't want to spend time. There's a finite amount of decisions I can make, good decisions, and they call it decision fatigue, right? You can only make a finite, limited amount of good decisions in a day. After that, it's downhill, and they don't want to waste one of their good decisions on what am I going to wear, or that's why a lot of people will structure their routines around food, is they'll have meal prep and everything because they don't want to think about what are they going to eat today. They want to have it systemized. And that's one of the ways you leverage yourself, is you can leverage yourself through, in terms of it's just technology. There's a lot of technology that can make your life easier.
Yes.
We were talking about that. You can leverage yourself through team, having a team to be able to do more. And you can leverage yourself through processes and systems. And you can leverage yourself through money also, but usually money pays for team or systems or technology also as well. But if everyone who's listening here, you want to get the most rewards out of the input that you have. And I would say that really double down on the things we're talking about, especially this thing called sleep, because when you don't sleep, you can't perform well mentally.
That was the game changer for me many years ago when I started respecting sleep. And it was on the back of, I think it was Ariana Huffington's talk, and then I started going into the science of deep sleep and the importance of REM sleep as well. Mm-hmm. And I think we've covered it in another podcast where we really talk about sleep. There's one element of it that I want to raise with yourself, and it was something you said which reminded me of what my grandmother used to do. So I was raised in Lebanon. So as a little boy, my parents used to leave us with my grandmother in the summer holidays for 3 months in the village, and we used to go nuts and climb fig trees. And anyway, I used to shadow her everywhere, cooking with her. But one of the morning rituals she had with all her friends is they'd gather around, drink coffee or tea, and talk about their dreams.
Wow!
So vividly. Excuse me. And that was one of the things that I know you train. You talked about it, I think, in Sardinia when I first heard you, the importance of writing down your dreams. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that and why?
Yeah, it's very important because people don't realize this. The talk I gave in Sardinia was on, because it's one of the blue zones where they have the most centurions, people living long lives. I was talking about having an ageless mind, and part of it is you're keeping your brain active and getting good rest around that, because sleep, the number of cognitive benefits, first of all, number one, when you sleep, you consolidate short to long-term memory. So if you're having long-term memory issues, look at your sleep. and make sure that you're getting good deep sleep. Number 2 is where you clean plaque out. They're realizing that a lot of challenges when it comes to brain aging is this accumulation of this beta amyloid plaque that builds up in your brain. And when you sleep is when you clear out that plaque. So sleep is very important. But a third reason why you want to be able to get restful sleep is, as you mentioned, when you're in that REM state, you dream. That and I know we've talked about Matthew Walker and sleep studies. We'll spend about 20 years of our life sleeping. And that means we'll spend about 3 to 5 years dreaming, roughly. And why are dreams important? Dreams, amongst other things, people think that when you sleep, your brain shuts off or it slows down. But in actuality, your brain is very active at night. And what is it doing as your body is resting? Your brain is consolidating short to long-term memory, but it also is taking everything you've learned throughout the day in your work, in your studies, and it's making sense of it all. And you actually come up with brilliant ideas often in your dream state. People don't realize that Mary Shelley came up with Frankenstein in her dream, that Paul McCartney came up with the song Yesterday in his dream, that a chemist dreamt of the framework of the periodic table came from his dream. Elias Howe, an inventor, came up with a sewing machine in his dream. Jack Nicklaus changed his golf swing, and he was shooting like high 70s. He changed his grip in his dream, and then went back to shooting like mid 60s on the golf course. So your brain is always working on this stuff. The challenge is when we wake up in the morning, what happens? We often forget our own dreams. So I have a process for remembering my dreams, 6 steps for remembering my dreams, and one of them is reflecting and writing it down. Because I think everybody should keep a dream journal by their bed, because you come up with real gold in the middle of the night, but sometimes when you wake up, we forget our dreams. So there's actually, just like with any kind of memory training that we're talking about, remembering names, giving a talk from memory, learning language, whatever it is, there's a process for remembering your dreams.
Wow. I love that, because it also boosts your creativity then when you write it down. So
it does.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. There's a science to success, but there's also an art to it also as well. And so using that logical part of our brain and also that creative, imaginative part of our brain, we have genius when we use more of it, for sure.
Yeah, one of the things you say is genius leaves clues, and I remembered that was the big clue my grandmother left.
That's huge. And that's what I love that, because I'd spent time 10 years ago. I went, took a trip to the Amazon rainforest, and we came across an indigenous tribe, and we were their very first Western contact. They never met Westerners before, so it was quite an experience. But this tribe in the Amazon, it's a dream culture, that they actually feel like the dream world is more real than the waking world. And they would wake up every morning talking about this at around 4 o'clock in the morning, and the whole village would share their dreams also with each other, and that those dreams would actually dictate how their day went and what they would focus on during their day, because they thought that they believe there's so much wisdom in those dream states.
Ancient wisdom.
There is a lot of ancient wisdom, for sure.
The only difference is that now science is confirming all that ancient wisdom. Before they'd say, well, there's no scientific basis for that, but now science is confirming and reaffirming everything that my grandparents did, your grandparents did. Things like not eating after dark, eliminating artificial light at night, eating out in sunshine during the day. It's so critical for your gut health. So science is just now catching up to ancient wisdom.
Right, science is stealing all the greatest ideas through history. But I like the meld between I'm very passionate about when I speak or do my podcast, but sharing the latest neuroscience, and here's the practical part of it. But you realize that so much of that has been used in ancient Greece and ancient indigenous tribes. They've been using this stuff forever.
It was a book that I read a few years ago is by Mark Bunn, who is now a faculty member of a higher branch. And he's one of our speakers for Upgrade Your Life 2020. And he has an incredible book called Ancient Wisdom for Modern Health. And he dives a lot into that. So for those of you who are listening who want to know what we're talking about, get a hold of Mark's book. It was incredible for me. It was incredible because I was reading it and thinking, do we really need to write and talk about this stuff? This is just so fundamental. We've just lost, the basics of living that we have to learn it again. It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, I think we're up to principle 6, which is sleep, and 7 is sorry. Yep.
No, it's okay. So 6 was clean environment with the receptionist. 7 is the fish tank with sleep, and then from there we go to the door.
Well, I go to the boardroom because the receptionist tells me it's the doorway right at the end, and that's where Jim is in the boardroom training his team. And I go to open the door, but it's not turning and it's not opening. But to the left, there's a glass box with a helmet in it, and it says "Wear me." So I put it on and I smash the door with my head with the helmet on, of course. And the door opens. I startle everyone in the room. So the 8th principle is
brain protection. Wear a helmet. If you want to have an optimal brain health and fitness, part of it is, yes, you get your sleep and clean environment, brain foods, but also protect your brain. Your brain is, this is coming from somebody who's had 3 traumatic brain injuries. Your brain is resilient, but it's also very fragile. I remember I was on the premiere of this movie called Concussion. If people haven't seen it, it's interesting because it was all about, Will Smith was in it. It was all about football players and the impact, the constant impact to their, to their head, the trauma that was causing was creating a lot of challenges. So when they have their brain scans, a lot of the depression or violent tendencies came from the physiological impact. And so what I would say is protect your brain. Think twice about the extreme sports. Wear a helmet when you're on your bicycle. If you have kids, make sure that they're protecting their brain because this controls everything. And so protect your brain.
Yeah, and on that, I want to add the protecting your brain as well from electromagnetic pollution. So my daughter's now eliminated Bluetooth speakers in her room. She puts in her phone on airplane mode, doesn't put it under her pillow.
a lot of children who have phones, they do that. They put their phones right underneath their pillows and just not on airplane mode, and who knows what's being transferred there.
Oh, look, actually, if you want to know, go on to buildingbiologyaustralia.com and you'll have a look at the work that Joachim Herman's done on this. And look, for those of you who are listening who have kids, please, please, please man up and actually be a parent, because I know a lot of parents want to be friends with their kids and they don't want to. You need to put your foot down when it comes to making sure that the Wi-Fi gets turned off at night. Ours is automated to switch off at 9 o'clock at night. That Wi-Fi is turned off on your laptop and only put on when you need to send things. You just need to be smart with the use of those things, and especially with putting the phone to your ear when you're talking. Now, there's a Dr. Teo in Australia who's a famous brain surgeon is saying that recently on 60 Minutes, he said that he's removing so many tumours around the ears. Never happened 10 years ago. So please protect your children's brains from EMF frequency. So that's the 8th principle.
It is.
And a very important one. The 9th principle is when I open the door, Jim's at the front and he has incredible focus. He didn't notice that I broke down the door. And behind him, he wrote in a red texter, new learnings.
New learnings. I'm right on the whiteboard there. So that's your 9th place is that whiteboard up front in the class. And I'm writing the words new learnings in your favorite color, whatever your marker color you enjoy. To look at, and that's to remind you of always be learning, because if you want to have a quick fit brain, you want to be able to make sure you're learning new things every single day. There was a study done on these nuns that I talked about in Sardinia. They were living well into their 90s and above, and the researchers found out half of it had to do with their gratitude and their emotional fulfillment, but the other half had to do with they were dedicated to lifelong learning. I mean, they were having deep conversations, they were reading and journaling, keeping their brain incredibly active, and it led to them adding years to their life, but not only that, life to their years also as well. And so I would say one of the keys to having a mental longevity and be mentally fit is to challenge your brain. And when we learn new things, when I was talking about neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to create new brain cells and new connections, what encourages that is novelty and nutrition. And so just like building your physical muscles, you give it novelty, you give it a workout, and then you feed that muscle with the proper foods. And so it could grow. Same thing with your mental muscles. You give it novelty through stimulus, conversations and reading and podcasts like this, going to epic events like the ones you produce, and also giving it the right nutrition. And that's what's really important. So
absolutely, guys. The biggest mistake you can make in business is to think you know it all. You always have to keep learning, attend, training seminars, new product launches, reading new books. I know, Jim, you're obsessed with reading books, and you teach people how to read a book every week.
It is. I mean, I think the average person only reads 2 or 3 books a year, and they're at such a huge disadvantage that somebody who could read 1 book a week or 52 books a year you have a PhD in any subject if you have the ability to be able to do that. And that's why leaders are readers. When the people I mentioned, that I bonded with, whether it's Oprah or Elon Musk, they came from, like, even Elon, it was based on science fiction books that we've shared, an interest in, and leaders read a lot. And Warren Buffett, I went to Berkshire Hathaway, he said to have he reads 500 pages a day or something. Bill Gates has said, Warren Buffett actually, when I was speaking at an event in Silicon Valley, Bill Gates was in the audience, and he's like, I asked him if he could have any one superpower, what would it be? And he said, Jim, the ability to read faster. And I was like, wow, I could totally help you with that. But Warren Buffett says he's probably wasted 10 years of his life reading slowly, because we're not trained to read faster or to retain what we read. And if you're in any profession, you have to, how many hours a day do you have to spend just processing information? A huge part of our day is just through input. Half our day, maybe 4 hours a day, maybe conservatively going through emails and business plans and keeping up with reports, books and media. If you could just double your reading speed and save 2 hours a day, even if you save 1 hour a day over the course of a year, 365 hours, that's how many 40-hour work weeks? 9?
Wow.
Like 2 months of productivity you get back saving 1 hour a day at something ubiquitous like reading. But most people don't read because they don't enjoy the process, because they're not good at it, because they didn't learn. The last time we took a reading class, we were like 6 years old, 7 years old. But the demand has increased, the difficulty has increased, the amount has increased, but our ability is still reading like a 6-year-old. And we have so much higher potential than that. Besides the fact we learned really bad habits when we were kids, that we all have the ability to do that. We just weren't shown. But I feel like reading is to your mind what exercise is to your body. And it's great, just not only the knowledge economy, because you are paid for what you know, and you can only make good decisions based on the knowledge that you have at any given time. Most people aren't updating their knowledge, and they feel like they say to me all the time, I'll speak at conferences or industry events, they'll come to me and say, Jim, I have 30 years experience in this industry. But when you dig deep, some of them all don't have 30 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience that they've repeated 30 times or 40 times, and that's why it's important to always have that beginner's mind where you're right. The biggest thing that keeps people from learning more is the idea that they already know it all. And your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. And you have to be able to learn new things, especially today, because as we talked about, the half-life of information, what we know is not, if it's not current, there's a lot of things that we could have misinformation, and that's almost as bad as not knowing something is know the wrong information.
Absolutely.
Because it's dated.
And you're going to teach us how to do that at Upgrade Your Life in your second session. You're doing 2 sessions, one before lunch, one after lunch, and I'm really looking forward to that.
That's going to be great. That's going to be a great workshop for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are going to get so much out of that. The final principle is that you motion for me to go sit to your left, to my right of the room, And as I'm walking over there to sit and wait for Jim, there's a table full of bonsai trees. And he said, go sit on one of the branches. And I'm thinking, what is he talking about? They're so little. But as I walk towards these bonsai trees, I realize that I'm shrinking. And then I become small enough to go sit on one of the branches and de-stress. So, of course, the final principle is?
Yeah, it's stress management. And so when you're there, maybe when you're learning, somebody's giving you like a nice back massage, or they're helping you to meditate on the bonsai plant, on the Japanese tree, because it's to remind you one of the biggest obstacles we have today is stress. When you are stressed and in fight or flight, your amygdala is firing off and you create cortisol, you create adrenaline, and it's not good for thinking.
This is a big issue in my tribe.
It
is
is
a corporate tribe.
It is. I spent a lot of time in corporate training for clients, and chronic stress actually shrinks your brain. Let me say it again. When you're under chronic anxiety, it actually shrinks your brain. And we know this. When you're stressed, you don't perform your best. You're not going to perform great on that sales call or giving a speech at that board meeting, or if you have to appear on media to talk about, last quarter's earnings, you're not going to perform your best. You're not going to, if you're nervous, remember that person's name, because stress really, it gets you in your body, fight or flight, but it's not good if you need to be able to take another financial accounting exam or to be able to perform at your best. So what, on a scale of 0 to 10, what's your stress levels? And then ask yourself, what am I doing to cope, to mitigate this stress? What activities have I built into my day to be able to relieve this stress? Whether it's meditation, whether it's working out, whether it's doing yoga, whether it's having a nice glass of red wine at night, to read a book by the fire, whatever it is to help you down-regulate. Because so many people are in their sympathetic mode, and they're not spending time in that rest and digest place.
Yes, yeah, very good point. I think, those 3 S's are critical out of those top 10, the sleep, sports, and stress management. I think are even more important for our community. So I hope from that tour of Jim's office, you're going to remember. Yeah. I certainly remembered every principle in order as well. So
that's remarkable. And notice that people could. I challenge everyone who's listening to this, and you'll remember it if you did it. If you just listened, then it's not. But if you took the time to imagine it and to role play and have fun with it, some people say, well, it's kind of childish. But how fast can children learn?
Yes,
children learn incredibly quick.
Yeah, my daughter learned it straight away. 2 minutes. I said, can you repeat the 10 principles? She fired them off. And I thought...
And all they had to do is walk around. And so this is called a memory palace. And this is a 2,500-year-old technique that ancient Greek poets and orators would use to be able to memorize their speeches and their poetry. They would take a place that they're familiar with. Maybe it's their home, and maybe go around, and everyone could do this. You could use your body, you could use your office, you could use your living room, and look around and say, okay, there are 10 places in this, in this room going clockwise, and I'm going to put my first idea in the first place, the second idea in the second place. And by the way, if you've ever found yourself saying in the first place this and the second place that languaging came from that 2,500-year-old memory technique. We don't use it. I'm bringing it back to the world to be able to access that tool. But that languaging is still there. People used to memorize information in mental filing systems around their home.
Yeah. Now, when you were saying that, I remembered a time when I had a job as a waiter, and I took people's orders, and I realized after a while that I could remember like entrees, mains of 8 people. I remember that was my record, and even with exceptions, that person doesn't want main as whatever it is.
Right.
And so that's the technique.
And
that's just placement.
Exactly. And that's a standout skill. And no matter what your profession, when you have the ability to do those kind of things, I've had people go into big meetings, sales meetings or interviews, and they'll spend 5 minutes on that person's website and memorize all the details about their company. And if they have team members, they'll memorize their names, and they'll go into that sales call or that interview, and then they'll recite facts that they've learned about their mission, about their company. And even when they leave, they'll see people that they've never seen before and then say goodbye using their name. And that's extraordinary skill, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And how are you going to show somebody you're going to care for their future, their finances, their health, their business, their family, whatever it is you have to offer them, if you don't care enough just to remember who they are?
Yeah, very powerful skill. That always impresses me when I'm in a meeting with someone who remembers things, because it shows that they care about the product, about the process, about the system, whatever it is we're developing. Yeah, so that's really good. The last thing I want to talk about, and this is where behavioral change comes in. Like, a lot of people will hear this stuff, but there's a huge obstacle, because they'll wake up tomorrow and hit the repeat button, like you said, and not implement a lot of these principles that we talked about. So I want to talk about the power of habits. It's something that you talked about as well, and you talk about going from your head to your heart to your hand, and habits is important. The hand is the implementation part. I'll let you talk about that, but what are the bad habits that we need to get rid of, and how do we get rid of them, and how do we create good habits for behavioral change?
Yeah, I love this topic. I did 2 podcast episodes on this recently, where I was talking to a friend of mine named Dr. BJ Fogg, who runs the behavioral sciences lab in Stanford University. And one of his students co-founded Instagram. And you talk about habits, how a lot of these platforms, both social media and otherwise, they employ psychologists who want to really understand habit design, because they want you to spend as much time as possible, on these platforms. Opening up Instagram and Facebook and everything. And so the idea behind this, when it comes to habits, is first you create your habits, and then your habits create you. Right? You create your habits of meditation, of working out, of eating the best brain foods ever, of stress management, and those habits create you back. And here's the challenge, though, is that universities suggest upwards of 40% or more, greater, of our activities are habitual, where we're not conscious of them, and where did they come from? And most of our habits we didn't sit down and consciously designed, and that's why I focus on the first hour of the day, the last hour of the day, that those bookends are very routine for me. There are things I do in the morning to jumpstart my brain, and there are things I do in the evening to down-regulate to get into sleep. And so I want to remind everybody the importance of their daily routine, because as we've all heard, if you want to win the day, you have to win that first hour of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get some positive momentum. Now, there's a myth around motivation, because in ways, motivation is, you shouldn't have to pump yourself up every single time you want to make a behavioral change. If you're just using willpower all the time and you're trying hard to do something, then it's not very sustainable, right? And so in lieu of motivation, I think motivation has different parts. I think it's having a purpose. So having a question that directs your energy back to your heart, as you mentioned, head, heart, hands. You could have an idea in your head of a change you want to make or a goal you want to reach. But if you're not acting with your hands, check in with the second H, which is your heart. Ask why. Like, why do I want to remember this person's name? Why do I want to read a book at 30 minutes a day? And just tap into the rewards, because that purpose is important. Another part of having sustainable motivation, not just a surge of motivation, but sustainable, is not just having a definite purpose in mind, is also having the mental energy. That's why we talked about the 10 things, because a lot of people aren't motivated because they're tired. A lot of people are procrastinate because they're exhausted. And so doing the 10 things, having the best brain foods and having the good rest and having less stress and being around positive, encouraging people that cheerlead you, that provides energy to follow through on whatever you're motivated to do. So you have purpose, you have energy. But the third part is the habit itself. And when I'm thinking about habits, behavioral change comes from micro commitments, meaning that what I'm obsessed about is not, it's hard to get somebody just to stop doing one bad thing and start just working out every single day, because that's sometimes a bit too big of a jump. What I'm asking people to do is to create a tiny habit or a micro commitment. What's the smallest part of that activity you could do right now? So in the example that my friend Dr. BJ Fogg says about flossing your teeth, we all know that research is conclusive that when you floss your teeth, people who floss their teeth live longer, right? Because of dental challenges and stuff. Here's the thing. A lot of people don't floss. So you don't try to get them to floss all their teeth. You try to, tiny habit is floss one tooth, because nobody's going to stop after one tooth, right?
That's true.
It's
yes.
hard. It's the hardest part
Yes.
is getting to the gym. But if you can get yourself to the gym, you're going to work out. But that's the tiny part of it, right? So you try to do these micro commitments. And so maybe it's not reading 30 minutes a day. Maybe it's, hey, I want you to read one sentence a day.
Yes.
One sentence, because most people will continue the second sentence, but it's getting over that inertia of, oh my goodness, that's so big, because sometimes the human brain doesn't want to intuitively make changes. It doesn't want to make mistakes. It doesn't want to learn new things. That takes energy to be able to do those things, but that's where we expand. Because while the beauty lies in the butterfly, the change and the growth happens in the cocoon. Right, it's the caterpillar's will, and it develops its strength by breaking out of the cocoon, that it develops the strength in its wings to become a butterfly and soar. But while the comfort zone is nice place to visit, there's no growth that happens in the comfort zone.
Yes.
Right. So what we're saying here in this entire conversation is get yourself to do new things. And sometimes it's too lofty to think about, oh, how am I going to meditate twice a day for 20 minutes a day? Maybe it's just being still and silent for a minute and then growing from there. Because it's really, if you're persistent, you could achieve it. But if you're consistent, you get to keep it. And the consistency, as you know, in finance and in business, consistency compounds. It just grows. So little by little, a little becomes a lot. So I'd rather people not they can immerse themselves, but some people burn out. They go to the gym. They haven't worked out for years. They go to the gym for like 5 hours. That you don't want to do that. You can't just go to the gym once and just be strong and agile the rest of your life, right? I'd rather somebody do consistently a few minutes a day and then build on it, and that's more realistic. So those are the components when we're talking about human motivation. If you're procrastinating, putting things off, check out your purpose, which is asking the question, getting tied into the rewards that'll come from it and really feel it. And then look into the mental energy, the fortitude that you've developed, the reserves that you've created, and vitality by doing those 10 things we just spoke of. And then look also into your habits that really break down motivation into tiny little habits that you do consistency. And because the most important thing is you get in the habit of showing up for yourself. That's the most important thing, the habit of showing up and playing full out, because how you do anything is how you do everything. So that's really the principle behind it.
It's something that David Goggins says that just sticks with me in most of his videos. He signs off with repetition every day, stay hard. Mm-hmm. So repetition leads to mastery, as the cliche is, but it's so true. And that's what we do in business, but we never think to apply those principles of consistency, repetition in our personal life.
And I'll caveat that also, because a lot of people are listening to this and they know this stuff, but the difference between like mastery, like a level of where you're at right now and the level that you want to get at, is so many people want to know what the latest, greatest, sexiest thing is, right? The magic pill that's going to give them all of the romance and the perfect body and the great, $1 billion business. But it's really what keeps us from that level. The mastery is saying we know this already, right? I feel like the people that are world class, they never get bored with the basics. They love the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are really the core, and they always come back to that.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I love the fundamentals, just showing up.
And it shows up in your life, because the people who really get really good at the basics, the core fundamentals, and then everything else you could build on it, right? But I feel like that when we're talking about the 80-20 rule, the most important thing is to keep the most important thing, and put first things first.
That. That's really good. And I love the tiny habits. Just, start small. If you don't want to do it, just start small. It reminds me, again, of something that David Goggins says. I mean, the guy's incredible, the innate wisdom that he has. When he first ran his 105-mile race without any preparation, he got to 70 miles and he was completely destroyed, and he sat there and he couldn't get off his chair again. But he told his mind, look, I don't want you to run 35 miles to go. I just want you to run. Let's just do the next mile. Let's just get off this chair. Let's just go to the bathroom over there and let's just tie the shoelaces. So there's tiny little things that you can tell yourself to do.
There's a memory principle that actually gets activated. They call it the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect is named after a psychologist in Europe, and she was in a cafe, and she would notice that the waitstaff would remember everyone's orders until the order was delivered. And once the order is delivered, they have no recall for it. And her last name was, Zeigarnik. And the Zeigarnik effect basically says that the human mind does not like open loops, that it wants to close the loop, if you will. And by starting somewhere, anywhere, is better than not at all, because if you're likely to start it, you're more likely to finish that process. But most people, they just don't get started. And that's what the tiny habits or these micro commitments do. If you tap into your purpose and you have enough energy, mental energy, doing those 10 things or any combination of it, even if you can't do all 10, do part of it is better than nothing. Then breaking it down to the smallest steps, because if you start it, you're more likely to finish it.
Yes, that's a really powerful tip. And it's one that we can implement, straight away. So everyone that's listening, whether a business owner or a senior executive, can start implementing a lot of these incredible principles and practical tips. Very, very powerful. But there's one thing that Jim and I can't control you do, and that is taking action part. That part's up to you. And the analogy you use of from the head to the heart to the hand, and you follow it up by saying it's the head's for information, the heart's for inspiration, but the hand's for implementation. Yeah. The implementation, guys, that's in your hands. And the more you learn, the more you read, especially books about behavioral change, identity change, will help you to make these changes. Myself, Jim, and people that you see out there that are doing things, I don't want to use the word successful, but are doing things in their life. We don't have any special powers or gifts. We just show up and do it. I came from a very poor village, came here, went through a lot of hardship, experience, insecurities. Before we came here, we had civil war in Lebanon, and I lived in a bunker for a few weeks with hardly any. We lived on bread and some water, and so I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had to wake up and do the work every day. So it doesn't matter how tough you think your life is, whether you're in an anxiety gap or a depression hole, because a lot of people are experiencing those things. If you wake up every day and do the simple stuff, especially there's 10 principles. Even if you did nothing else but just wake up every day and say, I'm just going to follow these principles one by one. Whether I'm feeling like crap or not, I'm just going to do them. And you'll be amazed. You will be amazed how, your life will change brick by brick, day by day. And there is no quick fix in life. There is no quick, get rich quick schemes. That's all rubbish. Anyone that tries to sell you that message is trying to rip you off with a product. I'm really, really grateful to have, excuse me, Jim, with me today, and to download so much wisdom. And I know you've done this out of generosity of your own heart, and that's just so beautiful. And I really look forward to seeing you on stage at Upgrade Your Life 2020. It's going to make a huge impact on the people that show up. But those of you who can't get to the event, please follow Jim's work. I listen to his podcast every Friday when it comes out in Australia, religiously. I only listen to 3 podcasts, and Jim's one of them.
Thank you.
And I really thank you and salute you for the work that you're doing.
I appreciate it. I mean, my mission, because I was the boy with the broken brain, is I want to leave no brain left behind. I want everyone who's listening to have their best, brightest brain. And so, people like listening to podcasts. They could just search my name in their podcast app, and every show is only 15 minutes long, and there's episodes on how to read faster, how to go through your emails, how to remember names, how to learn a language, the best brain foods, all of that, how to change your habits, how to maximize your sleep. People could just go to quickbrain.com. KWI. They have to spell it right. My last name really is Kwik. I didn't change it to do what I do, but
it's KWIK.
kwikbrain.com, and there get free videos on how to give speeches without notes and how to remember names, and also get all the links to our podcast. And I would challenge everyone here, talking about in the spirit of action. I believe knowledge is not power. Knowledge is only potential power. It only becomes power when we utilize it and apply it. So I would challenge everyone to take a small action right now, and that is to take a screenshot of this episode or of this video, or a picture of yourself, tag Sam, tag myself in it so we see it. I'm at Jim Kwik, KWIK, and share your big aha. What was one thing you got out of this conversation, or one new action that you're going to take? Because I feel like to learn something faster and better, it helps to teach it to somebody else.
Yes.
That when you learn to earn to return. You learn so you can earn, and then you earn so you can return and pay it forward. And when we have to teach it to somebody else, it becomes more of who we are. It becomes more identity. So we talked about the 3 I's: information, inspiration, implementation. But I think the 4th I is integration. Integration, it just becomes who you are. It's just that's who you are, your identity at the core. And I feel like in order to be able to get that, part of us has to teach it to somebody else. So we not only learn it, but when we express it out, we have to own it. And so I would say take a screenshot of this episode, tag us both so we see it, and share your big aha. What is one thing you got out of this conversation, or one new thing you're going to do, and share it with your community. And as always, I always repost some of my favorites because I always get new ideas and wisdom out of it also as well. So
that's awesome. Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for listening to this podcast. Until next time, I'm Sam McCall, and it's bye for now.